Forward. As he looked around at the blood-stained walls in his dimly lit cell, the events of the last 12 hours came rushing back. PJ had been protesting against a corrupt and violent regime when he was arrested, blindfolded, and dragged into a secret torture chamber hidden beneath a police station. He had just come to when he realized that he was still hanging upside down. His left eye was swollen shut and blood dripped down his face from a gunshot wound in his leg. This is it, he thought as he heard footsteps barreling toward him. PJ knew he was going to die that day, but to his surprise, the guard unshackled his legs, causing him to fall to the ground. This man, who had been so merciless just hours before, picked him up and dragged him to a door where his father waited on the other side. "If he is still in the country by morning, we will kill him," he said before slamming the door shut. It was almost midnight. The guard didn't tell him what he meant by morning, but PJ was pretty certain that he had hours left before blood loss or a bullet would finish him off. His family wasn't wealthy, but they took nearly everything they had to bribe the guard, which left little for his escape. Never having been out of the country, he now had a major problem. He was 6 hours from the nearest border, with no passport and only the clothes on his back. Fortunately, a family friend offered him a dilapidated motorbike, which would need to take him across hundreds of miles of rugged terrain, bitter cold, and mountain passes in the hopes of talking his way into a bordering country. Before he left, his father was able to acquire a passport that looked only slightly different than PJ. By slightly, the man in the photo was 3 inches shorter and weighed about 75 pounds more. To make matters worse, the policeman they bribed made it clear that he'd report his escape and that border control would be looking for him. Many people in PJ's situation would have probably given up, consigned to the fact that the obstacles ahead were insurmountable. But he knew the risk his family had taken and the sacrifices they made to give him even a chance of survival. He made the decision to get out of the country or die trying. Knowing that he would never see them again, he embraced his parents one last time before taking off for the border. On the way, he passed a security check. He knew the police would have his picture, so he closed his visor, sitting as straight as he could without passing out from the pain. The officer told him to remove his helmet when a fight broke out just behind him. The officer screamed at PJ to move along and ran over to break it up. Almost 2 hours later, he finally arrived at the border. This was his moment of truth. If the guard recognized him, he would face certain death. He was told to remove his helmet yet again, but this time there were no distractions. He couldn't get away or hide his face. He took off his helmet when the guard suddenly gasped. Over the last few hours, his face had become so swollen that he was hardly recognizable. He got off the motorbike, but the injury to his leg made it impossible for him to stand up straight, hiding his true height. The guard asked him what happened, and PJ replied, "I fell off the bike," in a way that seemed more like a question. The guard looked him over before inspecting his haggard motorbike. After a few more minutes of questioning, he said, "You better go straight to a hospital." A wave of relief washed over him as he passed through the gate. However, he was still gravely injured with almost no money. Fearing the border guard would notice his mistake and come racing after him, he didn't stop until he was almost out of gas. He stumbled into a convenience store and suddenly collapsed. The adrenaline that had pushed him over the last few hours had worn off, and he was suffering from excessive blood loss. The last thing he remembered was the bright light of an operating room, surrounded by what seemed like angels in white coats. He awoke to the friendly smile of his doctor asking what had happened. PJ replayed the events of what he could remember since leaving the police station, and the doctor told him how close he had come to death. Another hour and he would have bled to death. In the years that followed, PJ went from being a political prisoner with no income or education to a successful engineer, father and husband in the US. When asked what gave him the strength to carry on, he said, "My family had been through hard times with the government before. I wanted to survive to make their sacrifice worth it and eventually help my family the way they did for me. I didn't see giving up as an option. It was just another obstacle to overcome." As you'll see throughout this book, the resilience that PJ showed that night was incredible, but it's a capacity available to everyone. There's no way to avoid pain and suffering, but developing the resources necessary to become resilient will give you the ability to not only overcome adversity, but grow from it.